Peace had taken root, but roots can be poisoned from below. The galaxy smiled on the surface, yet beneath the calm. Current's old fears stirred not from aliens this time, but from within. Humanity itself, a new generation, had grown up hearing. Lisa's name is legend, not truth, and legends are easy to twist on Earth. A movement called the Pure Strand rose. Quietly at first, just voices in data streams, then rallies in city squares. They claimed humans had grown soft by listening to aliens, that kindness was a chain, not a bridge. They pointed to Nora's chamber, the shared schools, the open borders, and called it surrender, not strength. Their leader was a young woman named Dana, once a student of Elena's. On Ceres, she had loved the stars but feared what lay among them. Now she spoke of walls, not gardens, of silence, not song. Lisa watched the broadcast from her moon base, her hand still in the soil but her heart heavy. She recognized the fear in Dana's eyes. It was the same fear that once made humans hide in bunkers and shoot first. Maria stood beside her, arms crossed. Not angry, just tired. We cannot fight every shadow, she said. We do not fight, Lisa replied. We remind. They did not send ships or soldiers, they sent seeds again. But this time wrapped in notes written by children from 100 worlds. One from a Valian girl who learned to bandage wounds, from a human nurse. One from a Zenth boy who wrote his first poem after hearing Lisa's lullaby. One from Nora herself. A single word pressed into clay. Home. The packages arrived on Earth, not through official channels, but through couriers, friends, and quiet hands. They appeared on doorsteps, in schools and hospitals. Dana's followers burned some, but others kept them hidden in drawers, under beds, in pockets next to beating hearts. Then came the storm, not of war, but of silence. A solar flare unlike any before. It swept through human space, not dangerous to bodies, but to signals. Every comm channel, every broadcast, every link between worlds went dark for 3 full days. In that silence, fear grew like mold in Mars Colony 7. Now rebuilt people whispered that aliens had cut them off to invade on Ceres. Students huddled in classrooms wondering if their alien friends had abandoned them on Earth. Dana stood before crowds and said, this is what happens when you trust the void. But on the moon base, Lisa did not panic. She gathered everyone in the greenhouse. No screens, no speakers, just voices. She told stories of the first dark days after she returned, of how Maria sat with her and said nothing for hours, just stayed. Maria lit a small lamp, not for light but for warmth, and began to carve again, this time a figure of a child holding a seed. Elena led the children in song, old Earth songs about rivers and rain and coming home. Nora sat in the center, her silver threads now woven into a shawl. She hummed a tune that had no origin, no end, just comfort. And when the signal returned, it was not with alarms or warnings, but with a single message from the Valians. We are still here. Then the Zenth, we never left. Then the Arns, a pulse that said wait. Then hundreds of voices from every world that had received a seed. They had kept the dark from winning by remembering each other. Dana stood on a balcony in New Chicago watching the stars reappear one by one. She held a small package she had not burned. Inside was a seed and a note in a child's hand. You taught me stars have names, so do we. She did not speak that night, but the next day she walked into a school, not to rally, but to listen. Lisa knew the victory was fragile, so she did something no one expected. She asked to speak on Earth, not in a capital, not on a stage, but in a public park, where anyone could come. They came, not just humans, but Valians, in soft cloaks, Zenth with quiet steps, even alone. Kreldrone, sent by the Queen to witness Lisa, stood on a wooden box. No podium, no lights, just her and the crowd. I am not a hero, she said. I am a nurse. I held hands when people were scared. I planted seeds because life is worth growing even when the ground is hard. You do not need to be brave all the time. You just need to be kind once, and that once can change everything. A child stepped forward, not human, but Valian, and placed a flower at her feet. Then another and another, until a circle of blooms surrounded her. Dana watched from the edge of the crowd, tears on her face, not of shame but of relief. She had been so afraid of losing humanity. She forgot what it truly was that night. The Pure Strand did not disband but change. They began planting gardens in city centers, building clinics that welcomed all species, and teaching children not just human history but galactic stories. Maria flew the Iron Wren one last time, not on a mission but on a journey. She visited every world that had sent a voice during the dark days. She left a carving at each stop, a small figure holding a seed or a hand or a star. Lisa stayed on the moon base, but her garden now stretched beyond walls. It was a living map of connection, each plant labeled with a name and a world. Nora began to walk with help at first, then alone. She visited schools, not to speak but to sit and listen, and sometimes a child would take her hand and show her a drawing of 2 suns and a greenhouse. Elena's students grew up to be doctors, pilots, teachers, and one became the first human ambassador to the Orons, not with treaties, But with songs, the Krell Queen sent a final gift, a living sapling, from the first plant that grew in her chamber. It now stood in the center of the moon base, its leaves silver-green catching the light of both suns. The galaxy did not become perfect. There were still misunderstandings, still moments of fear, but now there was also a path back, a memory of how one voice, one hand, one seed had turned Ransom into reunion. Lisa grew older, her hair gray, her hands more lined, but her eyes still held the same calm. She still rose at dawn to water the plants, still sat with the sick, still listened more than she spoke. Maria stayed nearby, her ship parked but ready, not for war but for wonder. She taught children how to fix engines, how to read stars, how to be ready for both beauty and trouble. And when new ships arrived from unknown systems, not with weapons, but with questions, Lisa would meet them in the garden, offer water, and say, "Tell me your story." Because she knew now the greatest power was not in taking, but in returning, in showing that even the smallest life was worth the universe's ransom. And so the stars did not just shine, they whispered stories of a nurse, a pilot, a teacher, a survivor, and a child who once drew a picture that changed everything. And in every garden, on every world, someone would pause, look up, and remember that kindness was never weakness, it was the bravest thing of all. The peace did not last long, not because humans broke it, but because others remembered how easily one voice had shaken the Krell Empire. Whispers spread through the galactic markets that humans were not weak. They were dangerous in a new way, not with fire but with feeling. And that scared the old powers more than war ever could. Lisa tried to live quietly on the moon base. She tended her garden, taught children how to bandage cuts, and listened to the wind through the vents. But eyes followed her everywhere, even here, even now. She was no longer just a nurse. She was the human who made empires listen. Maria stayed close, not as a guard, but as a friend. Though she kept her rifle clean and her ship fueled just in case, they both knew the calm was thin like ice over deep water. Then the message came, not through official channels, but through a smuggler with a cracked comm unit and blood on his sleeve. The Krell were not the only ones who had taken humans. Other hives, other factions had snatched colonists from fringe worlds, thinking they could study them, break them, or sell them. The galaxy had seen Lisa's defiance and now wanted to test if all humans were like Heroni. Name kept appearing in the fragments: Elena, a teacher from Ceres Outpost 3 months ago. Her class had been evacuating during a solar flare when raiders struck. No bodies were found, only empty shuttles and a single data chip left behind with a child's drawing of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Lisa recognized the sketch. It was her, drawn from memory by a student she once visited during a medical rotation on Ceres. She had read them stories about Earth, oceans, and trees. Elena must have told them about her. That night, Lisa stood in the garden, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from rage. She had stayed silent once, and it had worked, but silence would not save Elena. Maria found her there under the twin moons. "You are thinking about going back," she said. "Not back." Lisa replied, "Forward." They prepared in secret, no flags, no fleet. Just the Iron Wren and a plan built on hope and old intel. They traced the data chip's origin to a neutral trade station orbiting a dead star called Vera, a place where laws were bought and sold daily, disguised. As scrap traders, they docked at Vera Station. The air thick with alien scents and low chatter of a dozen tongues. Lisa wore a hood, her face hidden, but her posture calm. Maria walked beside her, hand near her sidearm. They asked careful questions, paid with forged credits, and followed whispers to a locked cargo bay. Inside they found not Elena, but records, lists of human captives sold to collectors, warlords, and labs. Elena was marked for delivery to the Drathan, a reptilian syndicate known for dissecting sentient beings to study their pain responses. The shipment was set to leave in 6 hours. "We cannot take them all," Lisa said softly, looking at the names, hundreds of them from every colony. "We do not have to," Maria replied. "We just have to make it too costly for anyone to keep trying." They planted charges not to destroy but to broadcast using the station's own network. They hacked into every public screen, every comm channel, and played Elena's last lesson, a recording found on the data chip. She was teaching children about stars, her voice steady even as alarms blared in the background. Then Lisa spoke over it, not as a prisoner this time, but as a witness. "My name is Lisa. I am a human nurse. I was taken by the Krell and returned, not by force but by the choice of others who heard my voice now. Elena is gone and others with her. If you hold a human, ask yourself, will your walls protect you? When the galaxy remembers what we are worth. The message spread before the Drathan ship. Even launched Vera station erupted in chaos. Traders cut ties, buyers vanished. The Drathan captain tried to flee, but his own crew mutinied. They had heard the broadcast too and did not want to be the ones who silenced a teacher. Elena was found in a cryopod, barely alive. Lisa revived her with steady hands while Maria stood watch, her rifle ready but unused. On the return trip, Elena slept most of the way. When she woke, she did not speak of pain or fear. She asked about the children on Ceres, if they were safe. Lisa held her hand and said they were waiting for their teacher to come home. Back on the moon base, the garden grew larger now, with students helping tend the soil. Elena taught them under the open sky while Lisa and Maria watched, from a distance. But peace still did not last. This time the threat came not from raiders but from within the human alliance itself. A general named Holt had risen through the ranks on promises of strength. He called Lisa's story weakness dressed. As virtue, he argued that humans should strike first, build weapons, not gardens, and show the galaxy that mercy was a luxury they could no longer afford. He gathered ships loyal to his cause and declared the outer colonies under martial law. Anyone who spoke of Lisa's way was labeled a traitor. Lisa refused to hide. She stood before a live feed from the moon base, her voice clear and calm. I did not stop the Krell by fighting. I stopped them by being human. If we become what we fear, then we have already lost. Her words reached more than allies. They reached soldiers in Holt's fleet. Men and women who remembered having nurses like Lisa on their ships, who remembered kindness in the dark, one by one ships, defected not with violence but by turning off their weapons and opening their comms to her broadcast. Holt raged. He sent a destroyer to the moon base demanding surrender. Maria readied the Iron Wren, but Lisa stopped her. No more blood, she said. Instead, Lisa walked out to the landing pad alone as the destroyer hovered above, its cannons glowing. She raised a single hand, not in surrender but in greeting. The ship did not fire on the bridge. The captain, a woman named Claire, who had once been treated by Lisa during a training accident, stared down at the small figure below. She remembered the steady hands, the quiet voice that said, "You will be fine." Claire ordered her crew to stand down, then opened a channel to all human fleets. "This ends now," she said. "We follow the voice that heals, not the one that burns." Holt's rebellion collapsed within hours, not from battle but from shame. In the weeks that followed, the human alliance changed not by law but by choice. Colonies began sharing stories not just of war, but of teachers, nurses, builders and dreamers. Embassies opened on alien worlds, not with soldiers but with doctors and artists. Lisa still tended her garden, but now others came to sit with her, not to ask for weapons but for words. Maria still flew the Iron Wren, but now she carried seeds, not bombs, and sometimes she would land on a new world and plant a single flower in the soil, as a sign that humans had been there not to conquer, but to grow. Elena returned to Ceres with her students and built a school made of glass, so they could always see the stars far away. The Krell Queen watched these changes through secret feeds. She had kept one item from Lisa's cell, the tiny plant that had grown in the crack of the floor. It now sat in her private chamber. Its leaves, green and strong, a living reminder that soft things can break stone. The Drathan Syndicate disbanded. Its leaders vanished, not hunted but shunned. Even their own kind would not speak to them. The Valians sent a delegation to Earth not to negotiate, but to learn how to raise children who sang before they fought. The Zenth published the first galactic anthology of human lullabies, and the Orons sent another crystal. This one pulsed with the heartbeat of every human who had ever been taken and returned. Lisa held it one evening as the sun set. It beat like a second heart against her palm. Maria sat beside her, sharpening a knife. Not for war, but for carving wood. She was making toys for the children. "You think it will hold?" Lisa asked. Maria looked, up at the stars, then back at her friend. "As long as we remember who we are?" "Yes." And in that quiet moment, under twin suns with green shoots rising from red soil and a heartbeat humming in her hand, Lisa knew the ransom had been paid not once, but every day by every human who chose to be kind in a cruel universe. The galaxy had learned its lesson not through fire, but through a single voice that refused to be silent. And so the stars grew not brighter, but kinder. Aliens took a human prisoner. The universe paid the ransom in blood. The stars burned cold and distant above the outer rim of human space where silence ruled, and only the hum of engines broke the void. The Krell came without warning their warships. Dark as bruises against the night sky, they struck Mars Colony 7. Not for its weapons or its fuel, but for something softer, something they did not understand. They took Lisa, a nurse, with calloused hands and quiet eyes. She had spent her days tending. To miners with lung sickness and children with fever dreams, she wore no uniform, carried no gun. And yet the Krell chose her, dragging her through smoke and screams into the belly of their ship, the Skarath inside. The Skarath. The air smelled of metal, and something sour like old honey. The walls pulsed faintly as if the ship itself breathed. Lisa was shoved into a cell barely large enough to lie down in, but it was clean. There was water in a bowl, food in a tray, and a small window that showed the shrinking red dot of Mars. She did not cry. She sat cross-legged on the floor and began to hum a lullaby her mother used to sing back on Earth. The Krell watched through hidden lenses, their many eyes blinking in unison, confused by her Kalman. Earth Command debated what to do. Mars Colony 7 was already lost one. Life more or less would not shift the balance of power. Lisa was listed as presumed dead and her file was closed. But not everyone accepted that Maria, a freighter pilot with a sharp tongue and sharper aim, had trained alongside Lisa in the academy. They had shared bunk beds during basic, shared stolen candy, during night watches, and once hidden from a drill sergeant in a storage closet, laughing until their sides hurt. When Maria heard Lisa was taken, she did not wait for orders. She hotwired a retired gunship called the Iron Wren, loaded it with spare parts and old military codes, and blasted off into the black. The Krell did not torture Lisa. They did not chain her or starve her. Instead, they studied her like a puzzle. They sent drones to record her every move. She washed her face each morning, combed her hair with her fingers, and spoke gently to the tiny green shoot that sprouted from a crack in the floor. One day a young Krell drone limped past her cell, its leg bent at a wrong angle. Lisa reached through the bars without thinking and cleaned the wound with water from her bowl. The drone flinched but did not pull away when she finished it. Tilted its head and made a soft clicking sound. The elders gathered in the observation room, their antennae twitching. This human showed no fear, yet offered help without demand. It made no sense to their hive mind. They brought her before the Queen, the Heart of the Skarath, a being taller than 3 men with a carapace like polished obsidian and eyes that held no mercy. "Why do you not beg the Queen?" asked her voice, vibrating through the chamber like stone on stone. Lisa stood straight, her clothes torn, her hair messy but her voice steady, because begging changes nothing but kindness might. The Queen fell silent for a long moment, then gestured for her to be returned to her cell. But this time the door was left unlocked. Meanwhile, Maria cut through pirate lanes and dead zones, her ship rattling with every jump she used. Old Navy tricks to mask her signal and rerouted power to keep the Iron Wren alive on fumes. She knew she could not fight the Krell fleet alone, so she did not plan to. She carried something more dangerous than missiles. She carried Lisa's voice. Before leaving Earth, Maria had downloaded every recording Lisa ever made, from medical logs to bedtime stories. She had even found an old audio file of Lisa singing to a sick child. During a sandstorm on Mars, Maria loaded it all into a broadcast module and aimed it at the Krell network. When she reached the edge of Krell space, she sent her message, not a threat, not a plea. Just Lisa's voice, clear and warm, filling every comm channel across the hive world. "Release her, or the galaxy will hear what you took." The Krell ignored her at first. They laughed in their guttural way. One ship against 1,000. What could she do? But Maria was not alone. The broadcast spread faster than fire through dry grass. The Valians heard it. First, a proud warrior race who had fought humans for decades. They paused their war games when Lisa's voice described planting seeds in red soil and watching them grow. The Zenth traders who dealt in secrets and lies listened as she spoke of holding a dying man's hand and promising he was not alone. Even the Orons, the silent watchers of the deep void who never spoke to anyone, tuned in their ancient receivers, and for the first time in centuries sent a single pulse back, a symbol of recognition. Pressure built. The Krell Council argued some wanted to kill Lisa to end the noise. Others feared the growing silence from their allies. Trade routes froze. Messages went unanswered. The hive trembled not from attack but from doubt. Lisa felt the shift in the air. The guards moved slower, their clicks softer. She knew Maria was near. She also knew the Krell would use her as leverage if they felt cornered. So she made a choice. She walked out of her cell, not running, not hiding. She moved through the corridors as if she belonged there. Krell drones stepped aside, unsure whether to stop her. She reached the central chamber where the Queen watched the stars through a great glass dome. "You brought chaos," the Queen said without turning. "No, Lisa said you did when you took me thinking I was nothing." That moment alarms blared. Red lights flashed. The Iron Wren had breached the outer defenses. Maria flew like a ghost through the docking bay, disabling turrets with precise shots not to kill but to disable. She moved fast, her boots echoing on metal floors, but the Krell were ready. They cornered her in a narrow passage, energy bolts searing the walls. Then Lisa appeared at the far end of the hall, arms raised, no weapons, just her voicelet. "Her go," Lisa said to the Queen, "or your people will never know peace again." The Queen turned slowly. "You have no army, no fleet, no power." "I have a voice," Lisa said, "and now the whole galaxy is listening as if on cue the Valian armada dropped out of warp, not firing, not advancing, just watching. Their ships hung in the void like silent judges. The Zenth sent a formal message to the Krell High Council: release the human or lose all trade privileges forever. The Orans broadcast their symbol again, this time across every known channel. The human must walk free. The Queen stared at Lisa, then at the screens showing alien fleets that had never agreed on anything. Now united by one woman's courage, the Hive, mind fractured not from violence but from shame. "Every well," the Queen said, "you may leave." Maria broke free from the corridor and ran to Lisa. They met in the center of the hall. No words, just a tight hug that said everything. They raced back to the Iron Wren as Krell soldiers stood aside, not in defeat but in awe as they left orbit. Lisa looked down at the Hive world below. It was not burning, there were no explosions, no blood spilled, not yet, but the message was clear. Harm, one human, and the universe will answer. Weeks later, on a quiet moon base far from war and politics, Lisa planted seeds in fresh soil. Maria stood nearby, cleaning her rifle with slow, careful strokes. "You really think one voice can change things?" Maria asked. Not looking up, Lisa smiled as she patted the dirt around a tiny green shoot. It already did. Far away in the dark between stars, the Krell dismantled their prison cells. The Vailians opened diplomatic channels with Earth. The Zenth began translating human poetry into their flowing script, and the Orans sent a gift, a single crystal that hummed with every language in the galaxy when held. It played Lisa's lullaby softly like a memory. The ransom had been paid not in credits or ships, but in blood that was never spilled, because one woman chose kindness over fear, and one friend refused to let her be forgotten. The universe had learned humans were not to be taken lightly, not because they had the biggest guns, but because they had hearts that would burn whole worlds to save one of their own. Lisa watered her plants as the twin suns set. Maria leaned against the wall watching her. Neither spoke much. They did not need to. They had already said everything with their actions. Somewhere out there, other aliens watched and listened and remembered the day the humans taught them that the smallest act of courage could echo louder than 1,000 battles. And in the quiet of the moon base, life began again. Not with fanfare, but with green shoots pushing through the soil and two women who knew the cost of silence and the power of a single voice. The galaxy had grown quieter but not safer. Silence now carried weight, and every whisper was watched. Lisa's name was no longer just known. It was a symbol, and symbols attract both hope and Hunterson. The edge of known space where starlight frayed into nothing, a new signal pulsed, not from a ship or station but from deep inside a dead world called Kesar. Once home to a species that vanished overnight, now it hummed with a rhythm that matched no known language. Yet when decoded, it held two words. Lisa Kumamaria found the message buried in old salvage logs. She brought it to Lisa without speaking, just placed the data chip on the garden table between rows of blooming moonflowers. Lisa picked it up, her fingers brushing soil from the edge. She did not ask who sent it. She knew only one kind of call traveled that far without a name. "We do not have to go," Maria said, but her eyes said otherwise. Lisa looked at the children playing near the greenhouse, their laughter light against the wind. "If it is a trap, Someone else will walk into it if it is a cry for help and we ignore it. Then we are no better than those who took us. They left at dawn. The iron wrens, sleek and silent, slipping past patrols and patrols that no longer questioned. Human ships, they flew for 12 days through nebulae that swallowed light and asteroid fields that remembered old wars. Kessler was a husk of a planet, gray and still no wind. No water, just ruins that spiraled into the ground like roots reaching. For a heart that was no longer there, they landed in a crater where the signal was strongest. The air was thin but breathable and cold enough to sting. Lisa wrapped her coat tighter as they stepped onto the ash-colored soil. Maria carried a scanner. And a sidearm. Lisa carried only a med kit and a canteen deep below the surface. They found it a chamber carved from black stone with walls covered in symbols that shifted when stared at too long. In the center sat a being, not dead, not alive, wrapped in silver threads that pulsed with faint light. It had no eyes, no mouth, but Lisa felt it watching her. It was not alien. Not fully. It was human, or had been once. Its skin was pale. Its hair long and tangled, but its hands were folded over a small device that glowed with the same rhythm as the signal. Lisa knelt, ignoring Maria's warning hand on her shoulder. She reached out slowly and touched the being's wrist, cold, but not frozen. A pulse fluttered weakly beneath her fingers. The threads tightened, then loosened as if breathing. A voice filled her mind, not in words, but in feelings. Loneliness, fear, and a desperate need to be remembered. This being had been taken long before Lisa, before Mars, before Earth had ships. It was one of the first humans, snatched from a forgotten colony and brought here to be studied, to be made into a bridge between species. But the experiment failed. The body lived, the mind fractured, and the captors left it behind when they fled. Lisa understood then the signal was not a call for rescue. It was a plea for witness. She opened her medkit not to heal but to connect. She placed a neural patch on the being's temple and another on her own forehead. Maria tensed, ready to pull her away, but Lisa held up a hand. Weight images flooded her mind. Blue skies, green fields, a village by a river, children running through wheat fields, then darkness, metal hands, cold rooms. Voices that asked, "Why do you cry? What is love? What is home?" The being had tried to answer with memories, but the aliens could not understand, so they called it broken and abandoned. Lisa wept not for the pain, but for the love that had been ignored. She turned to Maria. "We cannot leave her here." Maria looked at the silver threads. "They are part of the planet now. If we cut them, she dies. Then we bring the planet with us," Lisa said. It took 3 days to rig the iron wren's core to sync with the chamber's energy field. Maria worked non-stop, rewiring systems meant for combat into something gentle, enough to lift a life without breaking it. Lisa stayed with the being, speaking softly, telling stories of Earth, of rain, of holding hands and planting seeds. On the 4th day, the threads began to glow brighter. The chamber hummed. The ground trembled, not from explosion but from release. They lifted off slowly, the entire chamber rising with them, encased in a field of stabilized gravity. The being now called Nora after the name. She whispered, and Lisa's mind lay still. But her fingers curled around Lisa's hand back on the moon base. They built a new greenhouse, not for plants but for memory walls lined with soft light and flowing water. Nora rested there, surrounded by voices, not demands but songs, stories and silence. When she needed a children came to sit with her, not to stare but to share. They brought drawings of stars and shells. And once a boy left a smooth stone on her blanket. She held it for hours. News of Nora spread not as a weapon or a wonder, but as proof that humans remembered. Their own, even across centuries, even across death, but not all saw it that way. From the outer void, a new faction emerged, the Sylph, a machine cult that believed emotion was the galaxy's weakness. They had watched Lisa's rise with cold logic and concluded that humanity's power lay not in strength but in connection. So they decided to cut that connection at its root. They did not attack ships or stations. They targeted stories. They hacked archives, erased broadcasts, corrupted data. They spread false versions of Lisa's voice, saying cruel things, spreading fear among allies. They even created fake images of Nora as a weapon, not a survivor. Trust began to fray. The Valians questioned if the human voice was still pure. The Zenth paused there. Translations. The Orans went silent. Liza knew words alone would not fix this. This time she had to show, not tell. She gathered volunteers, not soldiers, teachers, artists, healers, and pilots. They loaded the Iron Wren in a dozen borrowed freighters with seeds, tools, medicine, and recordings of real voices not edited, not polished, just people speaking from the heart. They flew not to capitals or councils, but to villages, outposts, and hidden colonies, places the Sylph thought too small to matter on a dusty moon orbiting a dying star. Lisa helped rebuild a school damaged in a sandstorm. Maria fixed water purifiers while children watched wide-eyed on a frozen asteroid. A miner sick with frostbite was treated by a human doctor who sang while she worked on a floating habitat in the rings of a gas giant. An old man heard his granddaughter's voice for the first time in years, through a clean, uncorrupted feed sent by a human engineer. The Sylph tried to interfere, but their machines could not understand why a shared meal or a mended toy mattered more than data. One by one, the lies unraveled, not by force but by truth. Lived out in daylight, the Valians sent warriors not to fight, but to help build. The Zenth resumed translations, adding footnotes. Of real human moments, the Orons returned with a new crystal. This one showed not just heartbeats but hands holding hands. The Sylph leader, a being of polished metal and cold light, confronted Lisa on a neutral platform, its voice flat and sharp. "You cannot win with kindness," it said. "The universe runs on power, not poetry." Lisa looked at the being, then at the crowd behind her. Humans and aliens standing together, not in formation but in fellowship. "You are wrong," she said. "The universe runs on memory, and we remember how to be kind even when it is hard." The Sylph fell silent, then turned and left. Not defeated but changed. Nora began to speak, not in full sentences but in gestures and sounds. She pointed to the stars, then to Lisa, then to the children. She was learning to belong again. Lisa still tended her garden, but now it stretched across the base with plots tended by many hands. Maria still flew the Iron Wren, but now she carried not just supplies, but letters from one world to another. Elena taught classes that included alien students who learned human songs and human ways of caring. And in the quiet hours when the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Lisa would sit with Nora and hold her hand, and together they would listen to the hum of the greenhouse, the sound of life choosing to grow even in the dark. The ransom had been paid again. Not in blood, but in presence, in showing up, in staying, when it would have been easier to leave. The galaxy had learned that humans did not just survive. They remembered, and in remembering they healed. And so the stars did not just watch, they began to hope.